And then, as night fully settles in, the monks drift off to sleep. Their days, though full of work and devotion, were always imbued with peace. They slept with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had done their best to live according to their vows. It wasn't an easy life, but it was a deeply fulfilling one, full of purpose and simplicity. As you close your eyes tonight, take a moment to reflect on the peaceful life the monks led. Imagine the stillness of the chapel, the soft chanting of their prayers, and the quiet contentment they felt at the end of each day. In a world where everything moves so quickly, perhaps we can take a lesson from their slow, deliberate rhythm. Maybe we can find peace not in rushing through life, but in embracing each moment, just as the monks did. Historians continue to study their way of life, fascinated by how these medieval monks were able to create such profound peace in a time that was far from simple. Were they truly content, or were they simply mastering the art of living slowly in a world that demanded quickness? We may never know the full answer, but their example remains a beacon of how to find rest in a restless world. As the monks' day unfolded with such rhythm and devotion, their lives were not only focused on the spiritual, but on the careful maintenance of their community. Community life in the monastery was central to everything they did. From shared prayers to collective meals, the monks understood that their individual peace and spiritual growth were intimately tied to their relationships with one another. Unlike today's often individualistic pursuits, the monks knew that true peace came from living in harmony, with each member contributing to the greater good of the group. Imagine walking into the monastery's dining hall, the soft murmur of voices filling the space as everyone takes their seats in quiet unity. The meal is simple, yet wholesome, with bread, cheese, and vegetables, each bite a reminder of their humble existence. The silence isn't oppressive. Instead, it feels like an invitation to meditate on the blessings of the day. The communal meal wasn't just a time to eat, it was a time to reflect, a time to connect with God and with each other in the most basic of human experiences. Historians still debate whether the monks' communal life, with its deep sense of belonging and shared purpose, was a form of retreat from the world or an effort to live more fully within it. Some suggest that it was a deliberate escape, while others argue that it was a conscious effort to create a microcosm of a more peaceful society. Regardless, the way the monks worked together created a deeply interwoven life, one in which their actions were seen as extensions of their devotion. Every task was done not just for survival, but as an offering, whether they were brewing ale, preparing food, or mending the monastery's robes. But it wasn't just the chores that were meaningful. Their studies, too, were central to their existence. The monks spent countless hours in the monastery's library, studying religious texts, ancient philosophies, and the teachings of the early church fathers. You might think of libraries as places of quiet solitude, but for the monks, the library was a sanctuary of thought and reflection, a place where the silence was filled with the rustling of pages and the scratch of quills. Historians often marvel at how many of the works we cherish today, ancient texts, sacred scriptures, and early Christian writings, survived only because of the monks who painstakingly copied them by hand. Imagine yourself in the monastery's library, surrounded by rows upon rows of parchment and vellum. The air is thick with the scent of ink and parchment, and the soft glow of candlelight casts long shadows across the room. In this quiet, peaceful space, the monks found a connection not only to the past, but to a higher calling. The slow, meticulous act of copying manuscripts wasn't just about preserving knowledge, it was about dedicating oneself to the work of God. In every stroke of the pen, they believed they were participating in a divine act of creation. Historians still argue whether this work was a form of prayer in itself, or if it was simply a task to fill the hours. But what remains clear is that for the monks, this was an intimate form of devotion. They believed that by copying the sacred scriptures, they were not only preserving the Word of God, but making it more accessible to future generations. And in that act, they found peace. Hey guys, tonight we journey back in time to a world that's surprisingly relaxing, a life led by medieval monks. Picture this. You wake up before the first light of dawn, the air is cool, and there's no rush. The quiet is almost too peaceful. You can hear your own breath, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world seems to disappear. You probably won't survive a single day in their shoes. But trust me, their life filled with rituals, contemplation, and daily tasks had a certain tranquility that's hard to imagine in today's world. So, Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Post your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. When you think of medieval monks, you might imagine them walking around in dark stone monasteries, chanting prayers in echoing halls. But did you know their days were surprisingly structured for peace and reflection? The first thing you'd notice if you were a monk, well, after the plain robes and the quiet, was the early mornings. The sun was barely a thought on the horizon when the monks began their day. The bell rang in the stillness of pre-dawn, summoning all to the chapel for matins, the first of many prayers. The life of a medieval monk was one of routine, reflection, and rhythm, almost like a symphony of devotion played out across the day. They followed a strict monastic rule, often the rule of street Benedict, which laid out every aspect of their day from waking to sleeping. It was the bedrock of their peace, with time allotted for everything from prayer to work to rest. Historians still argue whether the rigid structure of these rules helped maintain order, or if the peace of the life was more about the individual monk's ability to align with the divine. But no one can deny that in a world full of chaos, these monks sought serenity in the smallest, most deliberate moments. And in this structured serenity, their day began. The monks, gathering in the stillness before dawn, would often find solace in the act of prayer. There was no rush. It was a peaceful beginning to a long day of quiet contemplation and work. Imagine walking into a cold stone chapel with the soft light of candles flickering, the hum of voices rising in prayer. The quietness of the monastery is almost palpable in the morning hours, like a gentle invitation to pause and be still. As the monks slowly settled into their routine, one thing became abundantly clear. Their life was built around harmony and balance. Every task, every moment, was designed to foster inner peace and connection with the divine. The air would always carry the scent of incense in the mornings, lingering like a reminder of the holy purpose behind every action. They weren't just following orders, they were embracing a rhythm that spoke to the soul, a rhythm we might have long since forgotten in our modern rush. The monk's day unfolded like a ritualistic dance, one foot in prayer, the other in work, both moving in sync with a higher calling. But the core of their existence lay in something called the monastic rule, a set of guidelines designed not just to organize their lives, but to help them reach a state of divine equilibrium. The most widely followed rule was that of Street Benedict, written in the 6th century. This rule was more than just a list of do's and don'ts. It was a blueprint for living a life devoted to God in every moment. Historians still argue whether the rule of Street Benedict was the foundation for peaceful monastic life, or if it merely formalized a lifestyle that had already begun to take root in medieval Christianity. Either way, it worked. The rule divided the day into prayer, work, and rest, and each was given its due time and space. The most beautiful part of the rule was that it didn't just prioritize prayer, it ensured that every task, from cleaning to cooking to tending the garden, was treated with reverence. There were no mundane tasks in the monastery, only those that could be transformed into spiritual acts. So, once the monks finished their first round of prayers, they would continue with their day, and unlike most modern work, this wasn't a rush to check off tasks on a to-do list. Everything they did was intentionally slow, deliberate, and methodical. It's in this slowness, in the lack of urgency, that we find the key to understanding the true peace of their lives. Take their diet, for instance. You might imagine monks subsisting on bread and water, but in fact, their meals were surprisingly wholesome, simple, and most importantly, meditative. The monastic diet was often vegetarian, and it was centered around what the land provided. Monasteries were self-sustaining, with their own gardens, breweries, and mills. But the way monks approached their food was different from today's busy world, where we eat to move on to the next task. Meals in the monastery were moments of quiet reflection, taken in silence, allowing the monks to experience their food not just as sustenance, but as a reminder of God's provision. Can you imagine eating a meal in complete silence, focusing on the food in front of you, the simple grains of bread, the bowl of porridge, and reflecting on the daily blessings of life? There was no rush. Every bite was an opportunity to reconnect with God and be present in the moment. Historians still debate how strictly the monastic diet was followed. Were monks as ascetic as we imagine, or did they enjoy a little indulgence every now and then? Either way, the underlying principle was clear. Everything was an opportunity for reflection, even the most basic act of nourishment. In the monastery, there was no fast food, no distractions. Just the rhythm of prayer and work, blending together like a peaceful melody. The peace of the monks' day wasn't just found in prayer, though. It was also deeply embedded in the way they worked. Work in the monastery wasn't simply about producing goods or completing tasks. It was an act of devotion, whether it was tending the garden, brewing beer, which yes, monks were famous for, or copying sacred texts. Work was viewed as a sacred task that brought one closer to God. The medieval monk's work wasn't work in the sense that we think of it today. It wasn't an interruption of life, but an extension of it, a way to honor God and find peace. And then there was the silence. Oh, the silence. In a world where noise is constant, the monks knew something powerful about the effect of quiet on the soul. They embraced silence not as a punishment, but as a tool for spiritual clarity. Their days were filled with moments of profound stillness. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of meaning. Whether it was during the long hours of prayer, when the only sound was the rustling of robes and the whisper of the monks' voices chanting together, or during work, when the only noise might be the sound of a quill scratching across parchment, silence was a sanctuary. Historians are still fascinated by the monks' ability to live so harmoniously with silence, as if it was a natural extension of their spiritual practice. Today we might struggle to turn off our devices or take a quiet moment, but for the monks, silence was as natural as breathing. It allowed them to center themselves, to reconnect with their spiritual calling, and to find deep peace even in the smallest actions. The modern world might look at their silence and see a void, but to the monks, it was anything but empty. It was a space in which they could hear the voice of God more clearly. The communal worship of the monks, which happened several times a day, was another key piece of their peaceful existence. Imagine a room filled with soft chanting voices, a rhythmic and soothing hum that filled the air with devotion. There was no rush here, either. Worship was a time to be still, to be present, and to join together in the sacred act of praise. There was no competition for attention, no performance, just a shared desire to honor God through song and prayer. This peaceful devotion was something that every monk looked forward to, like a cherished moment of tranquility during their day. As the day drew to a close, the monks would gather once more for the evening vespers, the final prayers before they settled in for the night. But even bedtime, for the monk, was a time for peace. The monks didn't just drop into bed after a busy day. They spent time reflecting on the day's work and prayers, preparing themselves for rest with a final prayer of thanks. The soft candlelight flickering in the chapel, the quiet murmur of prayers, and the cool, still air made the monastery a place of peace, even as the day came to a close. Historians still debate the impact of such a structured, slow-paced life on the monks' mental and spiritual health. Were they truly content with their lives, or was there an underlying sense of longing for something beyond the monastery walls? Either way, their ability to embrace peace, to find fulfillment in every moment, is something we can learn from today. In a world that often feels rushed and chaotic, the monk's ability to embrace simplicity and find peace in everyday actions is a lesson worth remembering. Now, imagine it's evening. The last rays of sunlight have disappeared behind the stone walls of the monastery, and the monks are preparing for the final round of prayer for the day, Vespers. The soft hum of their voices echoes in the chapel, harmonizing with the stillness that fills the room. It's a beautiful ritual, one that marks the end of a day spent in devotion and reflection. As you listen, you can almost feel the sense of closure that settles over the room, like the day has been wrapped up in a gentle embrace of peace. For the monks, this evening ritual wasn't just about reciting prayers. It was about reflecting on the day's work and finding a sense of fulfillment. There was no rush to finish, no pressure to complete tasks before heading off to bed. Instead, the monks found meaning in the slow, deliberate pace of the prayers, savoring each word and allowing the rhythm to calm their minds and spirits. Vespers wasn't just the end of the day. It was the moment when they could truly let go of any remaining worries, the final exhale before sleep. Historians have often wondered how monks were able to fully immerse themselves in such quiet reflection, especially considering the fast pace of modern life. Could they truly let go of their worldly concerns in such a structured, predictable routine? Some argue that it was the structure itself that allowed them to feel liberated. while others suggest that there was something deeply spiritual in the simplicity of their lives. Whether it was the rhythm of prayer, the repetitive nature of their tasks, or the sacredness of their community, the monks found solace in their practices, and this created a profound sense of calm. Once the final prayers were spoken and the chapel grew quiet once more, the monks would retire to their cells for the night. But even then, their rest wasn't like ours. Their bedtime rituals were far from rushed. They would sit for a moment, perhaps reflecting on the day's work or offering a final prayer of gratitude. There was no frantic checking of the clock, no last-minute emails or rushed thoughts. Instead, they settled into their beds with a deep sense of peace, knowing that their day had been well lived and that they had done their best to honor their calling. Historians still argue whether this kind of peace could truly be replicated in today's world. Some believe that we've lost the art of slowing down and reflecting, while others suggest that the rush of modern life makes the peace of the monks seem impossible to attain. But no matter where you fall in that debate, it's clear that there's something uniquely restful about the way the monks structured their days. They didn't let the world control their time, they shaped their time around their spiritual needs, creating a life of harmony that many of us yearn for today. As they lay in their humble beds, surrounded by the cool silence of the monastery, the monks were truly at peace. There was no noise to drown out their thoughts, no distractions to pull them away from their prayers. It was just them, their thoughts, and the quiet presence of God. Historians still marvel at the serenity of this life, asking if such stillness could ever be achievable in today's chaotic world. The answer, of course, lies in our ability to slow down and find meaning in the simple moments, just as the monks did. But the monastery wasn't all about silent reflection and prayer. The monks also knew the importance of physical labor, which was woven seamlessly into their spiritual practices. The gardens, vineyards, and orchards were tended not just for the practical need of food, but as a way to commune with the earth and God. You can almost feel the warmth of the sun as you picture the monks working the soil, planting seeds, and harvesting crops, their actions a form of reverence for the earth's bounty. In these quiet moments, the monks connected with the natural world in a way that was both meditative and productive. Historians still debate the significance of work in the monks' spiritual lives. Some say it was the key to their peace, giving them a sense of purpose outside of prayer. Others argue that it was merely a practical necessity, a way to sustain the community. But whatever the reason, the work was an integral part of their lives, a reminder that peace isn't just found in contemplation, but in the steady, purposeful actions of daily life. And even when they weren't working, the monks understood the importance of play and recreation. Yes, you heard that right, play. While we often think of monks as serious and austere, they knew the importance of relaxation and enjoyment in life. They participated in simple games and activities, often using their free time to bond with one another. In this way, they ensured that their life wasn't just about work and prayer, but about creating strong, supportive relationships with their fellow monks. Historians still argue about the role of leisure in monastic life. Did it serve as a necessary reprieve from the demands of religious life, or was it a form of weakness? Some suggest that it was an essential part of their overall well-being, a way to recharge and reconnect with one another, while others believe that any form of recreation was a distraction from their true purpose. But what's clear is that even in their leisure, the monks remained connected to their spiritual mission. They knew that peace came not just from work and prayer, but from balance. And so, as the day came to an end, the monks would gather together once again for the final prayers of the day Vespers. But there was no rush, no stress to finish before bed. They lingered in the peaceful glow of the candlelight, offering their thanks for the day's work, reflecting on the simplicity of their lives, and preparing themselves for a restful night's sleep. As they drifted off to sleep, they carried with them a sense of contentment, knowing they had lived a day full of purpose, peace, and connection. Historians continue to be fascinated by the peaceful life of medieval monks. Their daily routines, filled with prayer, work, study, and communal living, seem almost otherworldly in today's fast-paced, noisy world. But perhaps, in the slow, deliberate rhythm of their lives, there's a lesson we can all learn, that true peace isn't something we find in external accomplishments, but something we create within ourselves by living a life of purpose and balance. As we move deeper into the peaceful rhythms of the monks' lives, one of the most fascinating aspects of their daily routine was the way they embraced solitude and silence. While we might imagine monks as hermits or isolated figures, Their life in the monastery was far from lonely. The solitude they sought wasn't one of isolation from the world, but a retreat from the chaos of everyday life, a space where they could focus entirely on their spiritual connection with God. In fact, the monks found that their greatest connection with the divine often came through silence. Silence wasn't seen as an absence, but as a sacred space that allowed them to hear God's voice more clearly. Imagine the quiet hum of a monk walking through the hallways of the monastery, his sandals barely making a sound against the cold stone floor. There's no rush, no frantic need to fill the air with conversation. Instead, the silence is rich, full of potential, a canvas where the soul can reflect and be nourished. Historians have long debated whether this focus on silence was a form of retreat from the world or a deliberate act of spiritual discipline. Some argue that the monks' silence was essential to their connection with God, a way to block out the distractions of daily life and tune into something deeper. Others suggest that it was more about community finding peace and connection in shared silence. Whatever the case, silence was a tool that the monks wielded with great skill, allowing them to live lives of contemplation and purpose. The beauty of this silence lies not just in the absence of noise, but in the way the monks used it to reflect, pray, and work. Silence in the monastery wasn't just a passive act, it was a dynamic, active pursuit. When monks prayed in silence, they weren't simply waiting for the next thing to happen. Each moment of silence was filled with intention and devotion. As we look at their work, we begin to see how silence intertwined with every aspect of their day. Consider the way the monks approached their tasks. Whether they were tending to the monastery gardens, copying manuscripts, or brewing beer, each task was done with care, attention, and reverence. Even the smallest of actions like pruning a rosebush or grinding herbs were done as an offering, as a form of prayer. They didn't just work to get things done, they worked to connect with the divine in every single action. Historians still argue whether the monks truly understood the therapeutic benefits of work, or if their work was simply a necessary part of life. But one thing is certain, the work of the monks wasn't done mindlessly or in haste. It was a rhythm, a dance that moved in time with the natural flow of the world around them. It was work done with grace and reverence, each task an opportunity to reflect and connect with God. And while the monks' work was certainly fulfilling, it was not without its challenges. The work wasn't always easy, and it often involved long hours of physical labor. But even in these moments, the monks found peace. Their work wasn't just about completing a task, it was about living in harmony with the natural world and with each other. When one monk worked in the fields, another would be in the kitchen, and yet another would be in the scriptorium, but each monk was connected through the shared rhythm of their labor. In fact, the idea of work as a form of prayer was so central to the monks' lives that it eventually became one of the cornerstones of monastic tradition. It was said that ora et labora, pray and work, was the motto that governed their lives. This dual purpose of prayer and work allowed the monks to find balance and peace in the midst of their daily tasks. The work was not a burden, but an opportunity to worship, to give thanks, and to connect with God in a tangible way. Historians often look at this approach to work with awe, especially considering how different it is from the modern attitude toward work. Today, work is often seen as something we do to make money, to climb the corporate ladder, or to achieve personal success. For the monks, work was a form of spiritual devotion, a way to honor God through the very act of living. The monotony of the day-to-day didn't wear them down, it brought them closer to their purpose. Even their studies, which might seem like simple academic exercises, were viewed as spiritual acts. The act of copying religious texts was more than just transcription. It was a form of prayer, a deep engagement with the sacred words they were writing. It was said that when monks copied the Bible, they did so slowly and deliberately, meditating on each word as they wrote it. Every word was sacred, and in each stroke of the quill, they connected with the divine. Historians still argue about the role of education in monastic life. Was it a way to preserve knowledge for the future, or was it simply another form of worship? Some argue that the monks were simply preserving the past, ensuring that the wisdom of the ancient world wasn't lost. Others suggest that the monks saw education as a way to better understand the divine, a means of growing closer to God through the study of sacred texts. But regardless of the reasoning, what's clear is that the monk study wasn't just about gaining knowledge, it was about spiritual growth. They weren't studying for personal gain, but to deepen their understanding of God's will, and in doing so, they were able to connect with the divine in a way that many of us might not be able to fully grasp. Now, picture the end of the day. The monks gather together for their final prayers, known as compline. It's a moment of peaceful reflection, a time to offer gratitude for the day's work and to prepare for the night ahead. There's no rush to finish, no sense of hurry. The monks move through the prayers slowly, each word filled with meaning, each breath a moment of connection with God. Historians often see the final prayers of the day as the culmination of the monk's spiritual practice. It's the moment when they can let go of the day's work, the moment when they can fully surrender to God's will. And in that surrender, they find peace. It's a peace that comes from knowing they've lived a life of purpose, a life that is rooted in prayer, work, and devotion. As the monks prepare for bed, they settle into the stillness of their cells, knowing that tomorrow will bring another day of peaceful devotion. And as they close their eyes, they drift off to sleep, with the quiet knowledge that they are living exactly the life they were called to live, a life of purpose, peace, and connection to the divine. As we near the end of our journey through the surprisingly peaceful life of medieval monks, it's impossible to ignore one of the most enduring aspects of their existence, their relationship with nature. Monks weren't just secluded in their monasteries, cut off from the world. They were deeply connected to the land around them, living in harmony with the cycles of nature, relying on it for sustenance, and finding peace in its rhythm. Imagine, for a moment, walking through a monastic garden. The air is fresh. The scent of herbs, basil, thyme, rosemary lingers on the breeze. You see rows of vegetables growing, each plant carefully tended by the monks as part of their daily labor. But this wasn't just about food. It was a deeply spiritual act. The monks viewed their work in the garden as a way to connect with God's creation. Every seed they planted, every plant they nurtured, was a reflection of their reverence for the Creator. There was no rush in the garden. The monks took their time, working slowly and methodically, allowing the rhythm of nature to guide their actions. The connection between the monks and nature was more than just practical, it was spiritual. The cycles of planting and harvesting, the changing of the seasons, all became metaphors for their own spiritual lives. Just as the earth needed care and patience to yield fruit, so too did the monks' spiritual lives require patience and devotion to bear fruit. It was a beautiful relationship, a partnership between man and nature, each depending on the other for sustenance and growth. Historians still marvel at how the monks were able to live so closely with nature while maintaining their spiritual devotion. Some suggest that their ability to live in balance with the natural world was a key part of their peace. Others argue that this connection to nature was essential for their physical and mental well-being. Either way, it's clear that the monks' connection to the earth was central to their lives. They saw themselves as stewards of God's creation, and through this stewardship, they found peace and fulfillment. In addition to their work in the gardens, many monasteries also had orchards and vineyards. These were not just for the monks' enjoyment, but served a greater purpose. The monks brewed beer, made wine, and grew fruits for preservation. These products were essential not only for the monks themselves, but also for trade, helping to support the monastic community. What's fascinating is that the brewing of beer and wine, which may seem like simple tasks to us today, were seen as sacred acts in the monastery. Beer, for example, was often brewed by the monks in a highly ritualistic manner. The process was treated with the utmost reverence, and the beer itself was considered to be a gift from God. Historians still debate the exact role that beer played in monastic life, with some suggesting that it was a form of spiritual offering, while others argue that it was simply a necessary part of life. Either way, it's clear that the monks were able to find a sense of peace and purpose in even the most mundane tasks. And it wasn't just the food and drink that the monks grew, it was also the herbs and plants they used for medicinal purposes. Monastic gardens were often filled with plants that could heal both body and spirit. These plants were used in simple remedies for ailments, and the act of tending to these healing plants was seen as another form of devotion. Historians often look at these gardens and wonder how much the monks knew about the medicinal properties of the plants they grew. While they may not have had the scientific knowledge we do today, the monks relied on their knowledge of nature to keep their community healthy and to offer care to those in need. Imagine walking through the monastery's herb garden, where the leaves of lavender, mint, and sage rustle gently in the breeze. There's a sense of serenity in the air as you walk past rows of plants that have been carefully cultivated for their healing properties. The monks, who had spent hours in prayer and contemplation, would find peace in these gardens, knowing that the work they did was helping to bring healing to their brothers and sisters. Their connection to nature wasn't just about sustenance, it was about healing, restoration, and balance. Historians still argue about the extent to which the monks were aware of the therapeutic benefits of the plants they grew. Some suggest that they had a deep understanding of herbal medicine, while others argue that they were simply following traditional practices passed down through generations. Either way, it's clear that the monks' gardens were more than just a source of food. They were places of spiritual healing and connection. In the evening, after a long day of work and prayer, the monks would often take a moment to walk through the gardens and reflect on the beauty of God's creation. It was a time of quiet contemplation, a moment to appreciate the work they had done and to connect with the earth once more. The gardens, with their vibrant colors and fragrant scents, became a symbol of the monks' peace and devotion. Historians still debate whether the monks' relationship with nature was as profound as it seemed, or if it was simply a matter of survival. But regardless of the reasoning, it's clear that the monks saw their connection with the earth as sacred. They lived in harmony with nature, and through that harmony, they found peace. As the monks settled into their cells for the night, they carried with them the peace they had cultivated throughout the day. The rhythms of prayer, work, and nature had all woven together to create a life that was peaceful, purposeful, and deeply connected to the divine. And as they drifted off to sleep, they knew that tomorrow would bring another day of quiet devotion and tranquil work. The world outside may have been full of chaos, but in the monastery, peace reigned. As we reach the final chapters of the monks' surprisingly peaceful existence, it's important to reflect on the ultimate goal of their lives, spiritual fulfillment. Their entire routine, from early prayers to simple meals, from communal work to the quiet moments in nature, was designed with one overarching purpose: to live in closer communion with God. Unlike many of us today, who often search for meaning in external accomplishments or distractions, the monks sought meaning in every breath, every action, every moment of stillness. Imagine for a moment what it must have been like to live in this way. To wake up before the sun and spend the first moments of the day in quiet prayer, to work diligently throughout the day, but never in a rush, and to end the day in reflective contemplation, knowing that each action had been performed in the service of God. Every part of their day, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, was a chance to connect more deeply with the divine. And yet, in that deep connection, they found peace, a peace that most of us today can only dream of. Historians continue to study the motivations behind monastic life, asking whether it was truly about spiritual devotion or whether it was simply a means of escaping the complexities and troubles of the outside world. Some believe that the monks sought peace by retreating from society, while others argue that their devotion was a deeply spiritual choice to live in a way that honored God. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. The monastery was both a sanctuary and a place of active service, where every task and every moment was an opportunity to grow closer to God. It was a life of balance, a life that allowed for both work and rest, prayer and contemplation, silence and community. And yet, despite their profound spiritual commitment, the monks weren't immune to the human experience. Like all of us, they faced struggles and challenges. They were not perfect beings, but rather individuals striving to live in accordance with their faith, and in their imperfection, they found peace not in being perfect, but in being devoted. The key to their peace wasn't in achieving a flawless existence, but in surrendering themselves to the will of God, embracing the rhythms of their days, and finding joy in the small, quiet moments of life. Historians often debate the extent to which the monks truly understood the spiritual benefits of their lifestyle, or whether they simply followed tradition. But what's undeniable is the lasting impact they had, not just on the religious world, but on the broader culture as well. The monasteries became centers of learning, medicine, and community, serving as places of refuge and renewal for many. They preserved ancient knowledge, cared for the sick, and offered solace to those in need. Their influence rippled far beyond the monastery walls, shaping the world in ways that continue to be felt today. In a way, the monk's life was a kind of spiritual art, a delicate balance of prayer, work, and contemplation. Just as an artist might pour their soul into a painting or a piece of music, the monks poured their devotion into every task they performed. Their life wasn't about achieving fame or recognition, but about creating something beautiful, a life of peace, purpose, and devotion. And in that creation, they found true spiritual fulfillment. The legacy of the monks is not just in the manuscripts they preserved or the communities they built, but in the way they lived their lives. Their example offers us a blueprint for peace in our own chaotic world. In a time when it feels like everything is moving too fast, when distractions are endless, and when finding peace seems impossible, we can look to the monks and learn something profound. They didn't seek peace by escaping the world, they sought it by embracing it fully, with devotion, reverence, and patience. They found peace not in the absence of work, but in the sacredness of work itself. Historians often wonder what modern society could learn from the monks' peaceful existence. Could we too find peace by slowing down and living more intentionally? By focusing on the things that truly matter, our relationships, our work, and our spiritual connection to something greater than ourselves? Perhaps the monk's way of life offers a path forward for those of us who are seeking peace in an increasingly noisy, fast-paced world. It's a path that invites us to slow down, to live more intentionally, and to find fulfillment in the simple, quiet moments of life. As the monks drift off to sleep each night, they do so with the knowledge that their day has been well spent, that they have honored God through their work and prayer. Their lives were filled with purpose, not because of external accomplishments, but because of their commitment to living in harmony with their faith. And as they slept, they did so with the peace that comes from knowing they had done their best to live a life of devotion. Historians continue to study the impact of the monks' lives, but perhaps the true impact lies not in the physical monuments they left behind, but in the way they lived quietly, peacefully, and with intention. Their lives were a testament to the power of devotion, and their example remains a powerful reminder that peace is not something to be found in the external world, but something we create within ourselves. So, as you prepare for sleep tonight, think of the monks and their peaceful, purposeful lives. In a world full of distractions, their example offers us a path to peace, one small, intentional step at a time. As we bring our journey through the life of medieval monks to a close, we must reflect on the broader impact of their devotion, how their seemingly simple existence shaped the course of history. The monks, with their silent prayers, meticulous work, and connection to nature, weren't just isolated figures retreating from the world, they were foundational figures in the preservation of knowledge, the spread of Christianity, and the development of social structures that continue to influence us today. Their lives, centered around peaceful devotion, laid the groundwork for a culture of learning, care, and community that shaped the medieval world. The monasteries, for all their silence and simplicity, became vibrant centers of intellectual and social life. The monks were not just spiritual practitioners, they were the keepers of knowledge, the scholars who preserved the wisdom of the ancient world. In an era when literacy was rare, the monks were the ones who copied manuscripts by hand, ensuring that the great works of history and religion were passed down to future generations. The libraries of the monasteries became repositories of knowledge, holding texts that were otherwise lost to time. Historians often marvel at how much of our written heritage survived through the dedicated work of these monks, who saw their work not just as a duty, but as a holy task. In this way, the monks' lives were not just peaceful, they were profoundly influential. Their commitment to preserving knowledge laid the foundation for the Renaissance, when the revival of classical learning would fuel the cultural explosion of art, science, and philosophy that defined the next several centuries. Without the monks, it's hard to say how much of the classical world would have survived. They didn't just live in a world of prayer and contemplation, they actively shaped the world around them. And while their contributions to knowledge and learning are often recognized, the monks' role in social care cannot be overlooked. Monasteries were centers of charity, providing care for the sick, the poor, and the elderly. The monks believed that their spiritual devotion extended beyond the monastery walls into the world around them. Their service to others was an expression of their faith, a way of putting their beliefs into action. In many ways, the monks set the stage for the modern system of social care, offering a model of selfless service that would inspire generations to come. Historians have often debated the motivations behind the monks' charitable acts. Was it a form of spiritual fulfillment, a way to earn divine favor, or was it simply a practical way to care for the most vulnerable members of society? Some argue that the monks saw their charitable work as a natural extension of their faith, an opportunity to live out the teachings of Christ. Others suggest that their charitable efforts were a reflection of the monastic ideal of community, in which each member cared for the well-being of the others. Whatever the reason, the monks' commitment to social care was an essential part of their legacy. The monastic way of life, with its focus on simplicity, devotion, and service, created a foundation for communities to thrive. The monasteries provided not only spiritual nourishment but also practical services, such as education, healthcare, and food distribution. The monks understood that peace came not just from prayer and silence, but from living in harmony with others, working together for the common good. In this way, their peaceful existence wasn't an escape from the world, it was an active engagement with it, a way of bringing peace and healing to the world around them. In today's fast-paced world, where individual success and material wealth often take precedence over spiritual well-being and community care, the monks' way of life stands in stark contrast. They weren't concerned with wealth or status. Their lives weren't defined by their possessions or achievements, but by their dedication to God, their community, and the service of others. In their quiet devotion, they created a world of peace and purpose, one that we can still look to as a model today. Historians continue to explore the monks' legacy, recognizing that their influence extends far beyond the walls of the monasteries. Their lives were a testament to the power of devotion, simplicity, and community. They were not simply retreating from the world, they were shaping it, offering a model for living that values peace, reflection, and service above all else. Their way of life reminds us that true fulfillment doesn't come from external achievements or possessions, but from living a life of purpose and connection, from finding peace in the simplest of moments. As you prepare to end your day, take a moment to reflect on the monks' example. In their silence, in their work, in their prayer, they found peace and purpose. In a world that often feels overwhelming and chaotic, their example offers us a path to calm, a way to slow down, reflect, and live with intention. The monks didn't seek to escape the world, they sought to transform it. They found peace, not in avoidance, but in active engagement with the world around them. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson they offer us. Peace is not something we find by retreating from life, but by living it fully with purpose, devotion, and a commitment to something greater than ourselves. So, as you lay down tonight, let their example guide you toward peace. In the quiet, in the stillness, you too can find your own connection to something greater, a deeper peace that transcends the noise of the world. As we draw near to the conclusion of our journey through the monk's life, let's take a moment to reflect on one final, profound aspect of their existence. The sense of contentment they experienced from living a life that was completely rooted in their faith. In today's world, many of us chase happiness through external achievements, career success, wealth, popularity, but the monks sought fulfillment in something much deeper, a spiritual connection that transcended all worldly desires. Their lives were not about acquiring things, but about giving time, energy, and devotion to their faith, their community, and to the service of others. Their contentment wasn't driven by the accumulation of material goods or status. Instead, it came from a deep sense of inner peace that arose from living in accordance with their spiritual calling. Imagine waking up each day knowing that your purpose was simple yet profound: to pray, to work, and to serve. In a world where so many of us are constantly striving for more recognition, more success, more wealth, the monks' contentment offers a refreshing alternative. They weren't seeking to become famous or influential. They weren't looking for validation or accolades. They were simply living out their faith in the most honest and devoted way possible, and in doing so, they found a level of peace that many of us can only dream of achieving. Historians still debate whether the monks' sense of peace came from their structured routine or from their genuine spiritual devotion. Some suggest that the strict routine, waking early, praying regularly, working steadily, was a form of discipline that helped them stay centered and focused. Others argue that it was the deep connection to their faith that truly brought them peace. Whatever the case may be, what is clear is that the monks' way of life offered them something priceless: peace of mind. They knew who they were, they knew their purpose, and they found joy in fulfilling that purpose every single day. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson we can take away from their lives. The monks didn't just live for the weekend or for the next vacation, they lived for each moment, finding fulfillment in the tasks they performed, no matter how simple. Whether it was working in the garden, copying manuscripts, or praying together as a community, the monks found joy in the work itself, knowing that each action was a form of devotion. Historians still wonder if this devotion was what allowed them to transcend the daily struggles of life, to rise above the distractions of the world, and find contentment in a life that many might consider austere or overly disciplined. In our modern world, filled with distractions and constant noise, it can be difficult to imagine living in such a way. We are constantly bombarded with messages that tell us to strive for more, to achieve, to climb higher. But the monk's example offers us a counter-narrative, one that invites us to slow down, to simplify, and to focus on what truly matters. Their lives were not about chasing external validation or success. They were about living in harmony with God, with nature, and with one another. It was this simple yet profound way of life that allowed them to find true peace and contentment. Historians often look at the monks' contentment and wonder how we can apply their lessons to our own lives. While it may not be practical for everyone to live in a monastery, there are elements of the monk's way of life that we can incorporate into our daily routines. The idea of slowing down, of finding joy in the small moments, of connecting with something greater than ourselves, these are all practices that can bring us closer to the peace that the monks experienced. It's easy to get lost in the hustle and bustle of modern life, to feel overwhelmed by the demands of work, family, and society. But if we take a step back and focus on the present moment, we can begin to create our own sense of contentment. The monks didn't have more than we do, they didn't have wealth or fame, but they had something that many of us long for: peace. Their contentment wasn't about what they had, but about how they lived. And in that simple way of living, they found fulfillment and joy that transcended the external world. As we finish our journey through the life of the monks, think about the way they lived quietly, purposefully, and with devotion. Imagine how their day unfolded, from the first morning prayers to the final moments of reflection before bed. Every step of their day was filled with meaning, and in that meaning, they found peace. The monks didn't chase after happiness, they created it, moment by moment, through their dedication to prayer, work, and service. Their contentment wasn't something they found at the end of the day, it was something they cultivated each and every day through their quiet devotion. Historians still marvel at the monks' ability to live such peaceful lives in a turbulent world. In today's society, where peace often seems out of reach, their example offers a powerful reminder that true contentment comes not from the things we acquire, but from the way we live our lives. By focusing on what truly matters, our spiritual connection, our relationships, and our service to others, we too can find peace in even the most chaotic of times. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, take a moment to reflect on the monks' contentment. In their peaceful lives, they found something that many of us are still searching for: a sense of fulfillment that comes not from external achievements, but from living with purpose and devotion. Let their example guide you as you navigate your own path, reminding you that peace is not something you have to chase, it's something you can create in the everyday moments of your life. As we approach the final moments of our exploration into the surprisingly peaceful life of medieval monks, it's time to reflect on the lasting impact of their lives. Their way of living, though seemingly removed from the fast-paced modern world, continues to offer us lessons that remain relevant today. In fact, as we navigate the challenges and distractions of the 21st century, their approach to peace, purpose, and devotion could serve as a roadmap to restoring balance in our own lives. One of the most striking aspects of the monks' lives was their unwavering commitment to a sense of community. In the monastery, the monks weren't just isolated individuals, they were part of something larger, something that transcended their own personal needs and desires. Their lives were deeply intertwined with the lives of their fellow monks, and they understood that their own peace and fulfillment depended on the well-being of the entire community. This interconnectedness was something that was carefully nurtured, day by day, through their shared experiences of prayer, work, and service. Historians have long discussed the importance of community life in the monasteries. For the monks, the community was not just a social group, it was a spiritual family, a place where they could grow together in faith and devotion. It wasn't a perfect system, of course. Like any group of people, the monks had their differences, their disagreements, and their challenges. But the key to their peace lay in their ability to reconcile these differences and work together for the common good. Every monk knew that his own peace was deeply tied to the peace of the group, and so they strove to support one another, offering compassion and encouragement when needed. Imagine, for a moment, the sense of belonging that the monks must have felt as they gathered together for prayers or shared in the work of the day. There was no competition, no sense of individual success or failure. Instead, the monks were united in a common purpose, and in this unity they found peace. Historians have noted that this deep sense of belonging and purpose was one of the primary factors that contributed to the monks' contentment. In a world that often emphasizes individualism and achievement, the monks' ability to live in harmony with one another offers a refreshing counterpoint. As we reflect on this communal aspect of monastic life, we might ask ourselves, how often do we prioritize our own well-being at the expense of those around us? In today's world, we are constantly encouraged to look out for number one, to focus on our personal goals and ambitions. But the monks remind us that true fulfillment comes from living in harmony with others, from sharing in the joys and challenges of community life. They knew that peace wasn't something to be achieved alone, it was something that could only be experienced in connection with others. Historians often discuss the challenges that monks faced in maintaining this sense of community. The monastery was a place of intense discipline and often strict rules, where personal preferences had to be set aside for the greater good. But despite these challenges, the monks found that by prioritizing community over individualism, they were able to create a sense of peace that many of us struggle to find in our own lives. In their daily interactions, whether during work, meals, or prayer, they learned the importance of patience, understanding, and forgiveness, qualities that allowed them to live in harmony and find lasting peace. In our modern world, we might find it difficult to imagine living in such a communal setting, but the monk's example offers us a valuable lesson. Peace comes not from isolation, but from connection. When we focus on the well-being of others, when we take the time to listen, to support, and to share in each other's experiences, we create a sense of peace that extends beyond ourselves. The monks knew that true peace wasn't just about inner tranquility, it was about living in harmony with those around them. Now, as we close our exploration of the monks' surprisingly peaceful lives, it's worth considering how we can apply the lessons of their existence to our own. The monks lived in a world that was far different from ours, yet their approach to life is timeless. They found peace not in the external world, but in the way they lived through devotion, reflection, community, and connection. In a world that is constantly in motion, constantly demanding more from us, their example offers us a way to slow down, to reconnect with what truly matters, and to find peace in the simplest of moments. Historians may continue to marvel at the monks' ability to live in such harmony, but their example is something we can all aspire to. We don't need to live in a monastery to experience the peace they found. All it takes is a commitment to slowing down, to reflecting on our actions, and to cultivating a deeper connection with those around us. By doing so, we can create a life of purpose, fulfillment, and peace. A life that, like the monks, is centered around the things that truly matter. As you prepare for sleep tonight, think about the monks and the peaceful, purposeful lives they led. Reflect on their example of devotion, work, and community. And in that reflection, may you find the peace that they experienced in their daily routines, peace that doesn't come from external achievements, but from living with intention and connection. Let their example be a guide to creating your own peaceful, fulfilling life. As we near the final moments of our journey through the surprisingly peaceful life of medieval monks, let's turn our attention to something often overlooked, the simplicity of their daily rituals. In our world of constant noise, busyness, and never-ending distractions, the monk's way of life seems almost revolutionary in its quiet simplicity. From their early morning prayers to their evening reflections, everything they did was rooted in a sense of stillness and purpose. And perhaps, in this simplicity, we find the ultimate lesson. True peace comes not from complexity, but from embracing the beauty of simplicity. Consider the monk's day as a simple circle, moving seamlessly from one activity to the next: prayer, work, study, and rest. Each part of the day balanced and integrated into the whole. The rhythm of their lives was set by the bells that rang at regular intervals, signaling the time for prayer or work. There was no frantic rush to get through the day, no need to multitask or juggle competing priorities. Instead, the monks knew that their purpose was to be fully present in whatever task they were doing, no matter how small or simple it might seem. Every task, whether it was cleaning a dish, sweeping a floor, or transcribing a manuscript, was a chance to honor God and find peace in the present moment. Historians often marvel at how the monks were able to live such calm, purposeful lives in a world that was, by today's standards, far more primitive and demanding. But the answer may lie in their ability to embrace the present moment fully, without the constant distractions and pressures that we face today. They didn't rush through their work or prayers. They took the time to be fully present in each moment, to reflect, to connect, and to find meaning in the simplest tasks. In our modern world, where we are constantly pulled in 1,000 different directions, the monk's example offers us a much-needed reminder. We can find peace and fulfillment in the simple moments, if only we take the time to slow down and embrace them. The monks didn't need the latest gadgets, the busiest schedules, or the most glamorous experiences to find happiness. They found it in the quiet simplicity of their daily rituals, and in doing so, they created a life that was full of purpose, peace, and joy. Historians still debate whether the monks' devotion to simplicity was a deliberate choice, or if it was simply a necessity for living in a time when resources were limited. Some argue that the monks were motivated by a deep spiritual commitment to live humbly and without excess. Others suggest that it was simply the way of life at the time, a natural result of the resources available to them. But no matter the reason, the monk's ability to live so simply and peacefully stands in stark contrast to the way many of us live today. In a world that values busyness and achievement, the monk's example reminds us that there is peace to be found in slowing down and simplifying our lives. Think about the tasks you do every day, whether it's making your bed, cooking a meal, or responding to emails. How often do you rush through these tasks, focused on the next thing rather than being present in the moment? The monks, in contrast, found peace in every task they performed, no matter how simple. They saw each task as an opportunity to honor God, to live with purpose, and to find peace in the present moment. Historians still debate whether this approach to life was unique to the monks or whether it was something that was more common in medieval times. But one thing is certain: their ability to live simply and intentionally allowed them to cultivate a profound sense of peace. In our fast-paced world, it can be difficult to imagine living like the monks. But perhaps we can take a lesson from their example and begin to slow down, to embrace the simplicity of our daily routines, and to find peace in the present moment. Whether it's through mindful eating, taking time to reflect, or simply spending a few quiet moments in nature, we can all find ways to bring more simplicity into our lives. So, as you prepare for sleep tonight, think about the monks and the simple, peaceful lives they led. Reflect on how they found meaning in the most ordinary of tasks, and how they were able to create a life full of purpose and peace through their devotion to simplicity. In a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming, their example offers us a way forward, a way to find calm, even in the busiest of times. Historians still marvel at how the monks were able to create such peace in their lives, but perhaps the answer lies in their ability to live with intention, to simplify their lives, and to find meaning in each moment. As you go to bed tonight, think about how you can apply this lesson to your own life. In the quiet moments before sleep, you can find peace too. You don't need to be a monk to experience the kind of peace they found. You just need to slow down, simplify, and be fully present in each moment. As we come to the final moments of our journey through the surprisingly peaceful life of medieval monks, we must reflect on the profound simplicity and purpose that defined their lives. These men, who devoted their days to prayer, work, and quiet contemplation, lived a life that many of us today would find unimaginable, yet so many of us long for. In a world constantly shouting for attention and filled with distractions, the monk's ability to find peace in the most ordinary aspects of life offers us a model we can apply to our own daily routines. One of the most fascinating elements of their peaceful existence was the way they structured their time. The monastic day was not defined by deadlines, meetings, or appointments. Instead, it was dictated by the rhythm of prayer, work, and rest, each part of the day balanced and filled with meaning. From the very first bell of the morning calling the monks to prayer, to the final prayer of the day as they lay down to sleep, the monks' time was marked by spiritual devotion. They weren't racing against the clock to get through their day. They were living each moment fully, with intention, mindfulness, and devotion. This rhythm of life so different from the frantic pace many of us live today, offers us an important lesson. Peace is not found in doing more, but in being more present. The monks weren't concerned with how much they accomplished, but with how deeply they connected to each moment. They found peace not in external achievements or the accumulation of material possessions, but in the simplicity of their daily tasks, whether it was working in the garden, copying manuscripts, or sitting together in prayer. Historians have long debated the reasons for the monks' deep sense of peace. Was it the structure of their day that brought them inner calm, or was it the way they viewed their work and their relationships? Perhaps it was a combination of both. The monks didn't compartmentalize their lives into work, rest, and prayer. Instead, they blended all aspects of life into a harmonious whole. Even their work, whether it was brewing beer or tending the gardens, was seen as an act of spiritual devotion, a way to honor God and contribute to the community. Their work wasn't a means to an end, it was an integral part of their spiritual practice. And while their days were marked by a deep commitment to routine, there was no sense of monotony or boredom. The monks found meaning in the small, everyday tasks. Historians have noted that their ability to focus on the present moment without being distracted by the pressures of the outside world was a key factor in their sense of peace. Each moment was an opportunity to serve God, to reflect on their spiritual journey, and to connect with the community around them. Whether they were working, praying, or simply walking through the gardens, the monks approached each moment with intention and mindfulness. In contrast, many of us today find ourselves overwhelmed by the demands of modern life. We rush from task to task, checking off items on our to-do lists, without taking the time to truly be present in the moment. Our lives are often filled with distractions. Our phones buzz, our schedules fill up, and we're constantly pulled in different directions. The monks, however, had mastered the art of slowing down. They didn't need the constant stimulation of modern technology to feel fulfilled. They found peace in the simple acts of living, in the rhythm of their day, and in the connection they felt to their community and their faith. Historians still marvel at how the monks were able to create such peace in their lives. How did they manage to live so intentionally, so mindfully, in a world that was far more physically demanding and uncertain than ours? The answer, perhaps, lies in their approach to life itself. They didn't see their daily routines as chores or burdens. They saw them as opportunities to live in harmony with their faith and with each other. The monks' commitment to living in the present moment, to finding meaning in every action, created a life that was both spiritually and emotionally fulfilling. As you prepare to end your day and settle into the quiet of your own routine, think about the monks' example. How can you apply their lessons to your own life? It might be as simple as slowing down, taking a moment to appreciate the present, or finding peace in the tasks you often rush through. We may not live in monasteries, but we can all find peace in the same way the monks did, by living with intention, embracing simplicity, and connecting deeply with the present moment. Historians may continue to debate the reasons behind the monks' peaceful existence, but the true lesson lies in the way they lived their lives. In a world that values speed, efficiency, and achievement, the monks remind us that peace is found not in doing more, but in being more present, more mindful, and more connected to the simple joys of life. In their quiet devotion, they created a life that was rich with meaning, purpose, and peace. So, as you lay down tonight, take a moment to reflect on the monk's example. Think about how you can bring more peace into your own life, not by rushing through your day, but by slowing down and living with intention. The peace the monks found is available to all of us if we're willing to slow down, embrace simplicity, and connect with the present moment. Now that we've explored the monks' peaceful way of life and their deep devotion, let's take a moment to reflect on the spiritual legacy they left behind. The influence of the medieval monks extends far beyond the walls of the monastery, touching everything from the preservation of knowledge to the development of Western culture and even the ways we approach spirituality today. Though they lived in a world vastly different from our own, their devotion to prayer, simplicity, and community continues to inspire us. The monks' most lasting impact was their role in preserving and transmitting knowledge. In an age when books were rare and literacy was a privilege reserved for the elite, the monks became the guardians of intellectual life. They dedicated countless hours to transcribing ancient texts, copying sacred scriptures, and creating manuscripts by hand. In this way, they ensured that the wisdom of the past would not be lost to time. Historians still marvel at how so many of the texts we treasure today, whether religious, philosophical, or scientific, survived through the efforts of these devoted men. Without their labor, much of our historical and cultural knowledge might have been lost forever. Imagine, for a moment, the life of a monk in the scriptorium. The quiet hum of the room is filled with the sound of quills scratching across parchment, the flicker of candlelight casting soft shadows on the stone walls. The monks are bent over their work, carefully copying each word, paying attention to every detail, knowing that their work is not just about creating a physical document, it is about preserving a connection to the divine and to the wisdom of the past. The work was slow, meticulous, and meditative, and it allowed the monks to engage deeply with the texts they were copying. Each manuscript was more than just a book. It was a vessel of knowledge and a symbol of devotion. Historians still debate the impact of the monks' intellectual work on the broader development of Western thought. Some argue that the monks were the true architects of the Renaissance, preserving classical learning during the Dark Ages and laying the foundation for the cultural revival that would follow. Others suggest that the monks' intellectual pursuits were simply an extension of their spiritual calling, a way to honor God by preserving the knowledge of past generations. Regardless of the motivation, it's clear that the monks played a crucial role in shaping the intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages and beyond. But the monks' influence wasn't confined to the world of knowledge. They also had a profound impact on the spiritual practices that have shaped Christianity throughout the centuries. The monastic way of life became a model for many Christian communities, emphasizing prayer, contemplation, and a deep sense of community. Monastic orders, such as the Benedictines and Cistercians, spread across Europe, establishing centers of worship, education, and social care. These orders became the heart of spiritual life in the Middle Ages, and their influence can still be felt in many Christian traditions today. What's particularly striking about the monks' legacy is their commitment to simplicity and humility. In a world where power and wealth were often seen as signs of success, the monks chose a different path. They rejected the pursuit of material goods and instead sought fulfillment in a life devoted to God and to others. This radical choice to live with less, to embrace simplicity, and to prioritize spiritual over worldly success is something that still resonates today. In a society that often values wealth, fame, and achievement, the monk's example offers a refreshing alternative. Peace is not found in what we accumulate, but in how we live, how we serve, and how we connect with each other. Historians often point to the monks' humble lifestyle as a model of spiritual discipline. They didn't seek attention or fame. Instead, they sought to live quietly, serving God and their community with humility and devotion. Their lives were not marked by grand achievements or accolades, but by a quiet, steady commitment to their calling. They didn't need recognition to know that they were living a meaningful life. And in this quiet humility, they found a deep sense of peace, a peace that came not from external validation, but from internal fulfillment. As we think about the monks' legacy, it's easy to see how their example has influenced not just the church, but also our broader cultural values. The emphasis on simplicity, humility, and devotion continues to resonate in our world today, offering a timeless model for living a meaningful life. Their approach to life, one that prioritizes spiritual growth over material wealth, community over isolation, and service over self-interest, provides a powerful counter-narrative to the often frantic, individualistic nature of modern life. Historians still discuss how the monastic lifestyle helped to create a more peaceful, cooperative society during a turbulent time. The monasteries served as refuges from the chaos of war and political upheaval, offering a place of stability and sanctuary. They became centers of learning, charity, and spiritual growth, providing essential services to their communities, such as education, medical care, and food. In many ways, the monks were the glue that held medieval society together, offering both spiritual guidance and practical support in times of need. As we reflect on the monks' influence, it's important to recognize that their legacy is not just a historical one. The values they upheld, simplicity, humility, service, and devotion, are just as relevant today as they were in the medieval period. In a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected, the monks remind us of the power of community, the importance of spiritual devotion, and the peace that comes from living a life of purpose and meaning. So, as you prepare for rest tonight, think about the legacy of the monks. reflect on the simple, purposeful life they led, a life devoted to prayer, work, and service. In a world that can often feel overwhelming, their example offers us a way forward, a way to find peace, fulfillment, and connection. As you drift off to sleep, carry with you the peaceful lessons of the monks, that true happiness doesn't come from external achievements, but from living a life that is aligned with your values, your purpose, and your faith. As we now approach the final leg of our journey, it's important to consider not just the peaceful lives the monks led, but also the spiritual depth that guided them throughout their existence. For the monks, peace wasn't merely an absence of conflict, it was a state of spiritual alignment, a harmony between body, mind, and spirit. Their commitment to their faith wasn't just an outward display, it was an inward journey, a lifelong quest to find and sustain divine peace. Their spiritual discipline, nurtured by the rhythms of daily prayer, work, and communal life, provided them with a deep well of inner peace that we can still tap into today. The monks' devotion to prayer was at the very heart of their peace. Imagine, once again, the serene atmosphere of the monastery chapel, where the only sounds are the soft chants of the monks and the occasional rustle of their robes as they move in perfect unison. In these moments, the monks weren't just repeating prayers, they were entering into a sacred dialogue with God, a conversation that transcended words. Their prayers were more than requests. They were offerings of gratitude, moments of reflection, and opportunities for spiritual renewal. For the monks, prayer wasn't something that could be rushed or treated as a task to check off. It was a sacred ritual, a time to reconnect with the divine and with their inner selves. Historians have often discussed the significance of prayer in the monastic life, noting that it was more than just an obligation, it was a vital part of their spiritual well-being. Through prayer, the monks found peace in their souls, a peace that didn't depend on external circumstances, but on their relationship with the divine. Historians also argue about the role of work in the monks' spiritual lives. Was it a way to stay busy, or was it an essential form of spiritual practice? In many ways, the monks treated their work as an extension of their prayers, seeing every task, no matter how simple, as a chance to offer something back to God. Whether they were laboring in the gardens, brewing beer, or transcribing manuscripts, the monks approached their work with the same reverence they brought to their prayers. Each action, each movement, was a prayer in motion. And through their work, they learned that peace wasn't something that could be found by retreating from the world, but through fully engaging with it, with mindfulness and purpose. The monks' relationship with nature also played a critical role in their spiritual peace. Nature, for them, wasn't something to be dominated or exploited, it was a gift from God. They saw the earth as a reflection of God's creation, a place where they could connect with the divine in a tangible way. The gardens, fields, and orchards they cultivated weren't just places of labor, they were sacred spaces where the monks could reflect on the beauty of God's creation and their place within it. Historians have noted that many monastic gardens contained not only herbs and vegetables but also medicinal plants, signifying the monks' deep understanding of the relationship between spiritual and physical health. By working in the garden, the monks weren't just growing food for sustenance, they were cultivating peace within themselves. The act of nurturing plants, watching them grow, and providing for the needs of the community brought a sense of purpose and tranquility to their lives. But perhaps the most profound aspect of the monks' peaceful existence was their commitment to community. Living in a monastery meant living with others, sharing space, resources, and daily rituals. The monks knew that their peace wasn't just individual, it was collective. Their connection to one another created a sense of unity and belonging that allowed each monk to experience a deeper sense of spiritual peace. While their lives were marked by solitude, this solitude wasn't isolation. It was the kind of solitude that allowed for deeper connection to themselves, to others, and to God. Historians have observed that the monks' ability to live in such close quarters, to share everything from their meals to their prayers, was a key factor in the peace they experienced. Their community was not a utopia. There were certainly challenges, disagreements, and conflicts, but their shared commitment to spiritual growth and peace allowed them to navigate these difficulties with grace. By living in community, the monks learned to embrace the virtues of patience, humility, and forgiveness, qualities that contributed to their overall peace. Their example of communal living offers us a valuable lesson today. In a world that often values individualism and self-reliance, the monks remind us that peace is not something we find alone, it is something that is nurtured and sustained in community. Whether we're part of a family, a friendship circle, or a larger society, our connections to others are essential to our inner peace. The monk's commitment to living in harmony with one another provides us with a model for how we can cultivate peace in our own relationships. Historians often wonder if we can ever replicate the monk's way of life in the modern world. In many ways, the answer is no. The pace of life today, with its constant demands and distractions, is far removed from the simplicity of the monastic routine. But that doesn't mean the lessons of the monks are irrelevant. In fact, their example may be more needed than ever. In a world filled with noise, stress, and division, the monks offer us a path to peace, one that begins with intention, mindfulness, and a commitment to both inner and outer harmony. As you prepare to end your day and drift off to sleep, reflect on the monks' example. Think about the ways they found peace in their prayer, their work, their connection with nature, and their commitment to community. In a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming, their example shows us that peace is not something we chase, it's something we create, moment by moment, with intention, devotion, and connection. Historians may continue to study the monks' lives, but their legacy isn't just one of the past, it's one we can carry with us into the present and the future. By living with purpose, embracing simplicity, and connecting deeply with the world and those around us, we too can find the peace that the monks experienced. Good night, and may you carry the calm and peace of the monks with you as you rest tonight. And so, we come to the final chapter in our exploration of the surprisingly peaceful life of medieval monks. In this last stretch of our journey, we step back to consider the bigger picture, the enduring spiritual and cultural legacy that the monks left behind. What did their lives truly offer to the world, and how can we apply their wisdom to our modern, often turbulent existence? Perhaps the most profound lesson we can take from the monks is the simplicity of their spiritual focus. In the midst of an ever-changing world, where distractions are a constant companion, the monks showed us that peace is not something external, it's something that comes from within. They didn't have access to the conveniences and luxuries of modern life. Their world was filled with hard labor, basic living conditions, and the constant struggle for survival. Yet, despite these hardships, they cultivated a spiritual peace that was far beyond what many of us experience today. The monks' approach to life was one of radical simplicity. They embraced the sacredness of the ordinary, seeing each action, no matter how mundane, as an opportunity to connect with God. Whether it was a quiet meal shared with their fellow monks, a moment of reflection while working in the fields, or the steady rhythm of prayer that marked each hour of the day, everything was done with intention. Every part of their day had meaning, and this meaning came from their commitment to living a life centered around spiritual fulfillment. Historians still wonder how the monks were able to maintain this level of peace and purpose in a time when survival was a daily challenge. How did they manage to avoid the stress, anxiety, and distraction that so often come with the struggle for survival in our modern world? Some argue that it was their strict adherence to their routines, their daily rituals of prayer, work, and reflection that allowed them to stay grounded. Others suggest that it was their deep connection to their faith that provided them with the strength and resilience to face the hardships of life. Whatever the reason, their ability to find peace amidst the challenges of life offers us a valuable lesson. In our modern world, where we are often pulled in a million different directions, it can be easy to forget the power of simplicity. We are constantly surrounded by noise, our phones buzz with notifications, our to-do lists seem never-ending, and the demands of life can sometimes feel overwhelming. But the monks remind us that peace doesn't come from filling our days with more and more tasks. It comes from learning to slow down, to find meaning in the simplest moments, and to focus on what truly matters. Their example shows us that peace isn't something we can buy or achieve, it's something we cultivate within ourselves through intentional living and a commitment to our spiritual well-being. Historians have often observed that the monks' peaceful existence wasn't about avoiding the world, it was about engaging with it in a deeper, more meaningful way. They didn't retreat from society, but rather they lived in a way that allowed them to serve their community, preserve knowledge, and contribute to the well-being of those around them. Their lives were centered around a commitment to God and to one another, and this commitment created a sense of unity and peace that permeated everything they did. As you reflect on the monks' peaceful lives, consider how you can apply their lessons to your own life. It might mean taking a moment each day to slow down, to reflect on what truly matters, and to cultivate a sense of inner peace through prayer, meditation, or simple mindfulness. It might mean embracing the sacredness of the ordinary, finding joy and meaning in the small, everyday moments that often go unnoticed. And just like the monks, we can find peace by connecting deeply with others, by living with purpose, and by serving those around us. In a world that often feels disconnected and fractured, the monks offer us a model of community, a way of living in harmony with others and with the world. Their commitment to communal living, to prayer, work, and service was a key factor in the peace they found. And it's something we can strive for in our own lives, even if we don't live in a monastery. As we wind down and prepare for rest, let us carry with us the example of the monks. Their lives remind us that peace is not a destination, but a journey that starts with a commitment to living simply, intentionally, and with purpose. As we reflect on their example, we are reminded that in a world full of distractions, true peace is found not in what we achieve, but in how we live each moment, how we connect with others, and how we remain rooted in something greater than ourselves. So, as you lay down tonight, let the calmness of the monks' lives settle in your heart. Their example of devotion, simplicity, and spiritual focus offers us a timeless path to peace. In the quiet of the night, let go of the noise of the world and embrace the peace that comes from living with purpose, intention, and connection. Now, as you close your eyes and drift into sleep, remember that just like the monks, you too can create peace in your life, moment by moment, through your actions, your intentions, and your devotion to what truly matters. May the peace that they found in their simple, intentional lives be with you as you rest tonight, and may it guide you toward a life of greater peace and fulfillment.